In the previous video, we looked at our form component and the disabling of the submit. Now the time has come where we want to actually submit our form. So if you jump up to the top, what we can do is actually create an event. Now you can use submit, however ngSubmit is also preferred. Now ngSubmit actually does some extra stuff for you, such as telling the ngForm underneath that in fact the form has been submitted. So what we want to do here when ngSubmit is fired, we'll just create a function. Now it doesn't take an event, but we can also pass our form. Because this is a template driven form, the form is the guider of the model. So what we can do is take the form, we could pass in the form as a whole if we wanted to, but whilst we've been debugging, down here we were doing form.value and displaying that actual full object. And that's exactly what we're going to pass through in here. So what we're going to do is form.value, but we're also going to do form.valid. Now we'll explain why momentarily. So we'll do handle submit when the ngSubmit fires, and on the component class, what we'll do is create this handle submit function. So inside the function arguments, we actually get the event, or you could call it a value. We'll just call this one passenger, because it's going to be of type passenger, because we've matched up our directives that we've been building out throughout this chapter to basically create our form for us. So what we're actually getting back is a passenger object. The second argument we'll call is valid, and that's going to be a Boolean. Now the reason we're going to do this is because you can simply inspect element and remove a disabled attribute from a button. So with JavaScript, we can just have that second level of control just to make sure that the form is in fact valid. So what do we do at this point? Now this is a stateless component because we have an input called detail, and it communicates with the passenger. It gets past the passenger, we bind it to the form. So on submit, we don't really want to talk to an API because this is in our components folder and it shouldn't really communicate with an API. So what we really want to do is create an output. Now we'll set this output up and then we'll actually go and set it up in the parent. So we'll create an output and we're going to call this output update. So anytime that we want to update, we're going to actually fire an event. Now as per usual, we're going to use the type event emitter. And in previous videos, we have used type any and done new event emitter. Something like this. So let's go ahead and import output and event emitter. So we'll do output and then event emitter. So we now have the input, we have the output, we have event emitter. And when we scroll back down, those will all be fine. Now what we're actually emitting, and why we didn't want to information overload you in previous videos, we're actually going to emit a passenger object. And you can see that that works absolutely fine. Now the interesting thing is we can also pass the type to the instance of the event emitter. So this is technically the correct way that we should set up our event emitters. So now that we have the output set up, we can go to the passenger viewer. Now at the moment, all we have is passenger form with detail, and we need to add this output called update. All we're going to do on here is a simple function callback. And what we'll pass in is a function called onUpdatePassenger. And obviously, because we're using an event, we're going to get the event back. So what we'll do is quickly set up this function on the component class. So we're obviously going to get an event here. It's going to be a passenger object. And inside of there, we'll simply log this event out. So before we can actually grab this event, we need to actually emit this event, which is where the submission comes in handy. So because we've got an instance of event emitter bound to our output called update, all we need to do inside of handle submit is this .update.emit, and we're just going to emit that passenger object. So as soon as the form has been submitted, we're going to make that is valid check. If it's valid, we're simply going to make an emit call and update the parent. So this is then going to get picked up via the onUpdatePassenger. Our event's going to be fired, and we're simply going to log it out in the console. So Let's go ahead to the browser and check this out. So you can see that we have our form, and what I'm going to do is change this to top motto. Now there is no local state here being persisted. What we do, we'll press update passenger. You can see object, full name, ID1, checked in true. We have the timestamp that corresponds to Steve. However, the name has now been changed to top motto. And you can see that this is coming from passenger viewer.component. So our container component is actually getting notified once we're updating something from our form. So you might be thinking at this point, what do we do with this event? We obviously want to update the particular passenger. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's do this.passenger service. Now we already set up a function called update passenger, which you can see here. So all we need to do is just pass it the event, and we can just simply subscribe to it. So we're going to call subscribe. We're going to get that data back, which is going to be of type passenger. And then in the response callback, all we're going to do is this.passenger equals. So we're going to use object assign, pass in a new object, and then we're going to do this.passenger. So what we'll do is merge those new changes against the current this.passenger, create a brand new object, reassign it back to this.passenger based on the event that was passed through. I can change the name to top motto. Now, when I go and update passenger, that has now made a request. So I can refresh, and you can see that that data has now been persisted. We can open up the console, of course, and we can go ahead and confirm this, and we can change the name back to Steve. It's made that put request to /1. So in this video, you've learned how to create a submit event and then pass that event back up to our container component. We've then communicated with the service and then updated our backend API.